Well, again, good morning, everyone. Um, Welcome to the RHU Colloquium Series on Race, Equity, and Justice. I'm Bonnie Thornton Dill, Dean of the College of Arts and Humanities and Professor in the Harriet Tubman Department of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. As those of you who've been attending know, and those of you who are joining us for the first time, this series is part of the college's broader initiative on race, equity, and social justice, which has been developed around the goal of understanding and dismantling structural racism. The broader initiative includes transforming curriculum, reducing discrimination in teaching, research, and service, and expanding the impact of this college's long-standing and continuing scholarship on racism, anti-racism, equity, and justice. Also, consistent with President Pine's focus on racial justice and identity, we introduce new members as we introduce new members of our university community. We are pleased to welcome students participating with us as part of the Terrapin Strong onboarding program. In RHU, part of our approach is to offer opportunities for our students to be exposed to the many different ways faculty in the college study and teach about these issues. In this series, I have invited faculty experts from across the college to discuss their scholarship and creative projects related to anti-racism and social justice. The format for each session includes a brief presentation, followed by a conversation with me, and then an opportunity for you to ask questions. During this time, we ask that you keep your microphones on mute. And during the last 15 minutes, you'll be invited to submit questions through the chat, which is being moderated by Associate Dean Linda Algery, who will manage the Q&A. Also, please note that this event is being recorded for future viewing on the college website. Okay, so today's session features Jessica Gatlin, Assistant Professor of Art. Jessica joined the Department of Art at Maryland in 2019. She received her Master of Fine Arts degree from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Jessica is an interdisciplinary artist who uses print media, performance, and video to comment in her art on the effects of oppressive social and economic structures. One of her recent commissions was for the Miller ICA at Carnegie Mellon University, and she has been a visiting critic at Vanderbilt University and at Watkins College of Art. So at this time, it's really my pleasure to present to you Jessica Gatlin.
Hello. Thank you, Dean, for that introduction. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk to everyone today. I am not able to share my screen. I need that permission. I'll show you some slides of my work.
Ashley, can you make her co-host or? Yep.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thank you. So let's see. All right, so you should be seeing a black screen with the title Interdisciplinary Forms of Resistance.
Yes.
Cool. All right, so I want to start just by acknowledging where I am. I'm in the unceded lands of the Piscataway and the Nanticoke people, also currently known as Baltimore. If you would like to find out where you are, you can visit nativeland.ca. There's a mapping and it kind of gives you a general area of some of the historical people that lived on the lands that we currently inhabit. And so let's talk about some of my work. I call myself an interdisciplinary artist. Sometimes I even call myself a non-disciplinary artist because I work in a lot of different ways. So this leads to a lot of very interesting conversations when people ask, like, what do you do? I'm an artist. What kind of art do you make? On any given day, it might be a different answer. And so often I'm also asked, like, what do you make work about? So my reaction is, you've been educated and socialized into a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy with a long history and presence of violence and colonization. You're a very tiny part of a complex and indifferent machine, a machine actively seeking to destroy that which it cannot exploit. How might you respond to learning about your programming? So that's a lot, a very intense topic. So I want to unpack some of that for you. My degree is in printmaking, and in the tradition of printmaking, I'm really drawn to the ability to make the multiple, to the process and the labor involved, to the history of industry and craft, as well as the ability to disseminate information. I'm especially interested in the ways that print connects to our tangible world, such as through advertising, books, and design. So with that, print gives me access to a lot of different media. It connects to my interest in textiles, sculpture, performance, storytelling and world building, programming, and mapping. I identify as a Black woman. With that identity, I embody an antithesis to a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. And being aware of that history, aware of stereotypes, challenges, my identity kind of puts me in an opposition, a direct opposition, if I wish to preserve myself wholly to this society. So it feels very necessary that my practice and my research be about this resistance, about complicating and controverting existing narratives, creating new ones, and disrupting the boundaries of fine art and what we call visual culture. My practice is therefore very personal and autobiographical. And because the structure of a white supremacist capitalist patriarchy seeps into every bit of our day-to-day, my practice is also very interdisciplinary. So I'll show you a few projects in which that kind of is, has manifested. The first being Hear a Vibration. Hear a Vibration is a multimedia installation. It includes print, video, sound, and sculpture, as well as projection. In this, I'm confronting this programming, attempting to course correct and re-educate myself. I'm searching for ways to resist and overcome this programming. In that search, I begin to theorize that to be fully cognizant, less susceptible beings, our brains, which represent sapience, and our gut, representing sentience, must both be healthy and in constant communication. While the brain reasons and makes sense of the world, it's also highly vulnerable to forces such as societal and cultural norms. And in a society that values reason over intuition, we often ignore a major function of the gut, which is to perceive or feel. Over time, this neglect leads to a buildup of messages unanswered. Overwhelmed and unable to communicate with the brain, the gut shuts off. In the installation, I present my findings and investigations. These findings only lead to more questions, many truths, and multiple realities. Here in this vibration, here in this multiplicity, a vibration occurs. So in this piece, I start by purposefully conflating the metaphor of trusting your gut with the actual research that the health of your gut may also affect your mental health. In conflating these two and applying the concepts to our society, I began to build a narrative around a conspiracy or a phenomenon in which we as individuals betray our gut in order to maintain and uphold the values of our society. Cheese puffs represent these delicious, deceptive lies we consume, which promise this thrilling experience, but betray us by giving us no nutrients, while also clogging that communication from the gut to the brain. Pattern and color are used to distort space as well as represent time, this moment of hypervisibility. For someone who's never experienced this, it's a moment in which you're seen, but also not seen. And perhaps for someone who's not experienced it, this is a jarring and uncomfortable, vibrant space. But for others who might already be in this vibration, it provides a moment of pause in which to be in a space and time that attempts to adapt to your frequency. And so with these metaphors in place, especially considering the physicality of my own anxiety, thinking about ways I've been deceived and the role that deception has played in my sense of self, I sought to fix this relationship between my brain and my gut. This image serves a lot of purposes, both in the installation and out of it. For the viewer, it's an overall map of the narrative, as well as an abstract mapping of the installation space. For the beneficiary, as I now call the character, it's a methodology for repairing the relationship. In experiencing the space, it's clear that the beneficiary is, to some extent, also the prescriber of the method. These potential but not examined courses of action are grayed out, pointing to potentially doing those in the future. A series of experiments has brought her this far, and possibly out of faith, intuition, or desperation, she carries out each of the actions in succession. But an unintended outcome occurs. The beneficiary disappears. This points to my own fears and suspicions within the investigation. What happens to a person who no longer accepts the general values of a society? Historically, in this country, people who have chosen to disrupt those things have been imprisoned, discredited, drugged, assassinated, or somehow otherwise relegated to the fringes of our society. And so it seems that this narrative has a dark ending, but is that the end, to be made invisible, or is that the beginning? This next project is 3 projects in one. In apropos proposal, Keeper of the Flag, and the Juneteenth Better Than Bezos raffle. This is in apropos proposal. What you're looking at is a representation of the US flag altered by using motifs within a watermelon. This kind of, I made this because it wouldn't leave me alone. The idea just kind of kept coming back to me, and I really felt that I needed to see it at this very large scale. It's about 12 feet by 5 feet. So it is a textile assemblage, hand dyed, and then the seeds are silk screened. As I'm making it, I'm starting to understand why I needed to make it. Thinking about the relationship between the colors of a watermelon and the Pan-African flag, thinking about various forms of Black resistance, independence, and organization, and very much thinking about the watermelon stereotype and how that is absolutely false, but also maliciously, with a malicious intent, to keep Black people away from an economic independence. Watermelons are typically a very easy crop to grow. They can be grown in the yard. As well, like they're a fruit that you usually eat with your hands, so people identify it as being messy or low class. You have to spit out the seeds, and that's another kind of like low class food eating type of thing. And it's also very healthy for you. Has the red of the fruit is a very healthy nutrient within the watermelon. So I'm really curious about the ways in which you can be separated from something that can make you whole, and what things are in place to pull you away from that. So another thing I'm thinking about with this flag is this idea of seeds and seedlessness. Also thinking about our contemporary agriculture and the way that I couldn't find a seeded watermelon. I had to very purposely seek out a seeded watermelon because they don't really sell them in the stores. And so my question is it because we really don't want to be bothered with seeds, or is it deeper in thinking about the ways in which we can't grow a watermelon? If you were to buy just a $5 watermelon, the number of seeds within that watermelon could set you for life in watermelon. But that's not available to us in the store. So thinking about that, and then further even thinking about last year, as we were becoming more and more aware of police violence against Black people, Black and brown people, thinking about these lives being taken away as potentially also being seeds. Not that these people are intentionally giving their lives or willingly giving their lives, but the things that we bury, what happens to those things? Not everything that gets buried gets hidden. Sometimes you're burying a seed. And so with this really large flag, I have it in my closet, don't know what to do with it. But I was really kind of moved last year thinking about Juneteenth and thinking about how this flag could be displayed. So I decided to put on a project called Keeper of the Flag. And with the Keeper of the Flag, the keeper is my collaborator. They help oversee the public exhibition and life of the flag. And in this, I came up with a few rules for the keeper, such as like the flag must never be sold. This is a project about stewardship and not about ownership. Very particular about thinking about ways in which art can be bought and then resold, or in some museum's collection and be used in a way that is not responsible. So I want to make sure that it's a relationship and it's not an actual purchase outright. So in order to find this Keeper of the Flag, I held the Juneteenth Better Than Bezos raffle. Participants could purchase a raffle ticket for $85. The $85 representing the amount of money that Jeff Bezos contributed in charity donations in 1 year compared to the average US citizen's salary. So if you or I had contributed that same percentage, it would have amounted to about $85. So with that in place, I'm also discounting that for people who identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color, and trying to create this relationship. And in the end, I choose a keeper, and that's the current part of the project we're working on, is getting it into places that specifically serve or benefit Black, Indigenous, people of color. And finally, really quickly, this is a project that's kind of just springing up. So these are some looser slides. This project is called Abode. So I've been in my house for a year. Don't know if anybody else is experiencing that, but in this space, my husband and I have been fortunate to buy a house, and with that sort of privilege and responsibility, we have been thinking about ways that we can kind of make our space an exhibition space. We both have histories in some of the more craft-based arts. My husband, Brandon, he originally was an airbrush artist from like the age of 14. So he's been like working in this commission-based way for a very long time, in addition to his current studio practice. And my beginning makings are related to sewing, learning how to quilt and sew garments with my mother and my grandmother. So we're really kind of thinking about the ways in which we receive heirlooms from our family creatively. We don't always receive objects, but things do get passed down. So we're thinking about that space, as well as the confusion or blurring the lines between what's considered high art or low art. So what you're seeing in this slide is on one side, I made these quilts for pillows, and on the other side, he airbrushed each of these portraits. Tupac, James Baldwin, Nina Simone, and Octavia Butler. So we're making these very specific choices within our house. And Abode will then not only feature some of our makings, but also the makings of artists that we come in contact with who are also kind of playing along this line of the hierarchies of art. These are also related very much to, it's not a new thing for people to be playing along this kind of delineation, but the effects of that delineation still loom large over systems of value. The terms often correlate with the themes of white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism as well. High often being one-of-a-kind arts created by educated white men, and low being, sewing, craft-based, a lot of domestic arts. So these histories kind of set forth an impetus for us to kind of reach back and honor our artistic origins, but also increase the visibility of artists who, like us, create works that defy the conventional traditional gallery model. This is my grandmother's quilt. My grandma is 99 years old, and she's been working on this quilt for probably the past 2 years. And she sent it to me to finish. And we immediately hung it on the wall and just wanted to see it as the artwork that it was. It became such a powerful piece, and we've been having a hard time parting with it because it just looks so beautiful on the wall as the art that it is. So this is the piece that kind of really charged us with this idea of how we make our home this very intentional space. Thinking about heirlooms and iconography and the time that we consider our first makings and our ancestors. This is another one. This is my great grandmother's quilt that I also have to finish. So I'm very much thinking about the ways that these things are being passed down to me. I won't be the keeper necessarily of these pieces, but my work will be in them, and I will continue the art of making in these ways that I've been taught. And then this last slide is just some of the quilts and pieces that I've been making that have been sort of turning into what I call paintings, as they kind of just end up being these small paintings. And that's me. I think I went well over my time, but hopefully we have some questions and things.
Thank you, Jessica. This was awesome. This was awesome. I hardly know where to begin because there's just so much here. And there are lots of little notes in the comments. You haven't had a chance to look at them. People saying how fabulous this is and how excited they are. So, and one of the places I was going to begin, and you talked a little bit about it, was kind of your formative roots as an artist. So it's great to kind of not only hear you talk about your mother and your grandmother in quilting, but to see that in your work. So I wonder, this tension that you talk about between being a Black woman in a white capitalist patriarchal society and the inherent contradiction in that. And I wonder if you if there was a particular spark that kind of made that apparent to you, or if that's been growing in some way. I wondered if you'd talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I guess the spark is like, I think it's a bunch of tiny sparks, and then one final kind of bigger event in graduate school. I intended to go and study African-American art history. That was one of the reasons I chose the program, but when I got there, the professor was no longer there. So I was kind of met with a challenge of like, well, how do I get this information that I really need. So the program had a opportunity to get a master's certificate in another topic. So I got that master's certificate in Africana studies. And so I'm studying history. One of the classes that I took was Black social movements since slavery. And that for me, like, was kind of the big moment that kind of, you know, I spent a semester being very angry because I was just like seeing this cycle play out over and over, in which like we have progress and then it's very intentionally pulled back in the way that language changes around these things. And so in that class, I'm kind of seeing like the way that has been done specifically to me through my education, like just from a very young age, and being kind of taught this basically this propaganda about who has contributed to our society and what they have contributed. And I would say probably the one thing that kind of just ended it for me was kind of learning about how Fred Hampton died. And that was one that was just like, I cannot accept this. And it kind of like, once you know that, it kind of everything else slides out from under you. Like the idea of criminality or who's right, who's wrong, what's good, what's bad, it all just starts to slide and you have to question everything.
Yeah, for people who want to know more about Fred Hampton, the movie Judas and the Black Messiah gives you an introduction to that. Yeah, Jessica, it is, it's a moment I think many of us have experienced at some stage, that kind of recognition, that anger. And so then you translate it into kind of a relationship between the brain and the gut. How did you get there? To talk a little bit about that.
When I was growing up, I was always kind of an intuitive sort of feeling kind of person. And along the way, you know, like that gets taken away in some of those same instances, like feeling that, if you're having a feeling of something being wrong and everyone telling you that, no, you're the wrong one. So you stop trusting yourself, you stop trusting your instincts. And it got to a point that like, I really needed my instincts, especially in making art. I needed those instincts. I needed from some of that stuff to come from within, and I couldn't find it. And so I was really, I was also experiencing a lot of anxiety. I get very nervous with public speaking and things like that. So I was just like, what is this thing? Like, how does this work? Can I stop this? Can I manage this like feeling? And so that just kind of like got the wheels turning about like thinking about, if I can't trust my gut, why can't I trust my gut? Like what's wrong in there? And so I just started to kind of take some deep dives into some sci-fi and also some actual science to kind of make this narrative start to work.
So, you know, I read a little bit about the FLAG project, and the image I saw was not as big as the image you showed today, and the clarity about the watermelon and all of it, and you talk there. So anyway, I'm going on there. I said there are too many things. That's too, but so how do you kind of take that those feelings and make choices about? Talk a little bit about your practice and your process. That's really what I'm getting at.
Yeah. In my practice, I like to acknowledge that my brain isn't necessarily the leader. I think about, you know, my hands being just as smart as my brain, or like the different choices that I make kind of inherently. those being just as valuable. So there are some times where I can't like put in words what it is, or the way that the Flag Project kind of came to me, it just was this like impulse that wouldn't leave me alone. And I had to just kind of give into that. And along the way, my brain starts to catch up and starts to think, oh, right, I've seen this, this is coming in, this is like that article I read 3 years ago, like that's coming up. So a lot of it does start with an impulse, or just kind of the inkling of something and knowing that it has to be done.
Mhm. And you said something in something I read, and I wondered if you'd share that a little bit about kind of the watermelon stereotype. And
Mhm.
would you just say a little bit more about that, about where that comes from and how that is a oppressive force?
Mhm, mhm. So my understanding of the watermelon stereotype is that it's associated with laziness, it's associated with the inability to control one's appetite, and just overall being dirty and low class. And where that starts to play is at kind of throughout slavery and after, watermelons were a crop that African Americans were able to grow, and have some economic independence. And it was a way in which they could kind of sustain themselves, but also be seeking this economic independence to keep themselves independent of the larger system. And there were people who did not like that. So it was very much a campaign through print images, through posters, through like all of these, this propaganda and advertisement. Over time, it becomes this like very close association of laziness and of the inability to control your appetite, or kind of be this like upstanding person that that the larger society values. So and that gets passed down, like to the point that, like, you know, people may or may not choose to eat watermelon in the presence of people who are not from their same background. I know I look at it that way, and I know plenty of people do, and I know that that doesn't come from nowhere. It's kind of, whether it's directly told to you at some point or just kind of like absorbed through the osmosis of culture, it gets in there. And something as simple as not being able to enjoy yourself in public space is highly oppressive. To and think about all the different other ways that people are not able to show up fully as themselves. Something that simple keeps them from being completely in that space.
No, that really resonated for me. I mean, I remember shame associated with eating watermelon as soon as
Mhm.
you said that. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so I just think that that's a really important insight. In the first of your exhibitions, you or the slides that you showed us,
Mhm.
you ended with this question about kind of disappearing and whether that was so. Talk about that a little bit more,
Mhm.
would you?
Um, I think for me, that comes directly from the book, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man,
Mhm.
thinking directly about the way that, you know, you can move in the dark, you can move in silence, and you can still get things done. And maybe if you're being ignored, that's for the best. You can accomplish a lot when nobody's looking. So I think like that is a way of thinking about, like, just because we aren't getting the recognition, just because we aren't winning the Grammys and the Oscars and all those things, just because you aren't getting those things doesn't mean you can't move in that invisibility.
Mhm. You know, that reminds me of the HBO special that they did on Black art in the
Mhm,
absence of light.
mhm,
And I thought that that was such a kind of profound way of describing how many Black artists have been working for years going back years and years and years, and with not invisibility to themselves or
Mhm.
people or whatever, but to the larger society. And so I guess as an African American woman artist, kind of how do you see your place at this moment and
Mhm.
your possibilities and visibility, invisibility as an asset or
Mhm.
a hamper? Or I don't think that's such a word. But anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
connotation.
Well, I guess like in the last year, I've definitely kind of moved a lot slower and tried to move with more intention because I am aware of a surge in attention to Black artists. And and I don't think like that can be a good thing, but it doesn't mean that it is just inherently good. A lot of people I've understood in my experience, a lot of people are looking for ways to stay relevant, and so they'll attach themselves to the most low-hanging fruit, and a lot of times that happens in a very fast pace, and I don't believe in that kind of fast moving. I think a lot of the details get lost in that sort of hurried space. So I'm aware of my responsibility like that much more acutely in this time. So I would rather be a little less visible, but I'm also like learning how to step up and step into these places of authority and, like coming to terms with the fact that people are actually listening to me. So being more careful and thoughtful with what it is I say.
Well, you have a lot to say, both visually and verbally, and so we're excited to hear it. So, Abode,
Mhm.
when you talked about making your home, I don't know, a space of kind of artistic presentation,
Mhm.
visibility, sharing, I thought about the work of Theaster Gates in
Mhm.
Chicago and the way that he's kind of created a local, well, a community really, but an artistic space that brings people. So I wondered how you were thinking about that for yourself and
Mhm.
yeah, in your home.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I've always had a tendency to make things and like just kind of instead of buy DIY sort of mentality. So I've always like really valued and treasured like the specific kind of things that are in and around. And throughout some of the like opportunities that I've had, I've spent some time in like craft schools and various learning about various like I guess you could call them like functional arts, like ceramics and things like that. So just really learning about what goes into something like that and changing my relationship to what I take in. And kind of like going back to that idea of like labor and where we place value. It's really easy to go to Target and get get the thing immediately, but it doesn't necessarily create this. It's not necessarily a sustainable relationship. And I want to honor not only my ancestors in that, like thinking about the ways that like my grandma's quilts are now paintings, and that is like that's such a like big thing for me. But also thinking about like a cup being just as special, or like the bowls we eat out of. Everything is made by somebody, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. But those sorts of like bringing that into the space and just kind of being really intentional about what comes in, what stays, what you look at or touch every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was very inspirational. I have a quilt that my grandfather made.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm like, oh, I have to pull this out. It's been sitting in. So very inspirational. So we could talk forever, but there are a lot of questions and a lot of comments in the chat. And I want to go to that and give others a chance to ask their questions of you. So I'm going to turn it over to Linda to do the Q&A. Jessica, thank you. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jessica. This has been great. And there are a lot of comments and questions, so I'll just go ahead and dive in. So the first one, and I'm going to quote directly from the question. It's a little explanatory before the actual question, but in Hear a Vibration, you articulate how the Black female subject disappears and how metaphorically that disappearance is meant to suggest the ways in which the Black female subject or Black subjects are robbed from us by prison, police brutality, etc. Why, can you talk a little bit about why you've chosen to use metaphorical representations rather than literal representations of the violent forces of white supremacy to convey your meanings?
Yeah, a lot of reasons. One of them being that I can't watch another video. I have not seen the George Floyd video. I have not seen any of these videos because I can't keep feeding that to myself. And I think we deserve better. So I choose to make images that don't outright represent those things. Also, I'm actually more interested in formal work. If I could, I would just be making probably more abstract and formal work and never even talk about race or my gender or any of those things. But I recognize, and I'm trying to come to terms with the fact that like I live in this body, and no matter what, whether I want to or not, people are going to assign certain roles to me. So if I'm gonna be a part of that, then I'm going to have some say in how that goes. So I'm always thinking about my work formally in terms of color. I love color and pattern and kind of these bright, vibrant kind of spaces. So I bring that to the work because I'm my first audience. If I don't want to see it, then I don't want to make it. So I'm kind of using this a little bit of a diversion tactic, I guess, to kind of like lure people in and then get them comfortable and then say some really uncomfortable things. So, you know, I guess that's why.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The next question is actually a little bit of a turn. What is the role of public art museums in your mind? And I think the questioner means maybe not just in your own personal interests with your art, but your opinion about them.
Mhm. I think they definitely serve a purpose. They are problematic inherently because so much of public art museums are just based in the same. It's in one way, it's a way for very wealthy people to funnel some of their money and give back while they're also like destroying things. So there's so many problems within it. I think they're a necessary institution, but it's just unfortunate in the way in which we have to interact with them right now. I guess like I don't think about my work being in museums very much because I'm not really interested in that. I'm more interested in people, everyday people, like kind of just like spending, like getting the art out to people instead of like luring them into the museum. Because some people are just never going to go to a museum, but those people do still deserve some sort of beauty and kind of experience that takes them out of their everyday.
Great. Could you tell us about the iconography? Sorry for messing that word up. In your grandmother's quilt, are those about the planes, and is there a story behind them?
There's no story behind them other than that plane motif is literally the first thing I learned how to sew. It's a pretty common pattern. And my grandma, like when I was little, like she had me cutting out the pieces and putting them together and showing me that exact motif. So now 30 some odd years later, seeing it again, and it just kind of like brings me back to that original making. And so it's like, that's the story for me. But also like thinking about ways in which we can make iconography. So I can give that further meaning down the line. Like if I choose to continue that tradition with my daughter or my nieces and nephews, kind of giving them that and making sure that they take with them the airplane motif or things like that. So I like to acknowledge that like history isn't always just behind us. Like I can make it as I'm going to.
Mhm. And is there any other symbolism in the other quilts that you showed? So
No, these are all just like these are all just family kind of makings, spare time makings. There's no like particular pattern or anything.
So the next question, this questioner does say that they respect that this may not be the space for this conversation if you wish not to answer the question, but their question is, if you're willing, could you speak on the wisdoms you learned or are learning or want to learn in navigating white institutions as a Black woman and the strategies you employ to stay up?
Yeah, I don't know, like it's in the making. It's daily. It's the work that I'm doing. It's the working in my home space and realizing that I'm a person outside of the institution. And, you know, like, I think for all of us, it can be easy for like us to be like academics and then people. But I try to just like on a regular kind of alter that. And it's like, I'm a person who needs food and rest. And then I'm also a professor and an artist, and those being able to put those hats down sometimes.
And someone asked if the better than Bezos and that be planning on other types of events for folks. I think maybe everybody on this call might want to participate.
I think, well, for some reason it was like freezing for a second, but I think you were
Oh, I'm
asking
sorry.
about
Can you
the-
hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I said the question was, is the Better Than Bezos raffle occurring again? Because I think this person is saying they'd like to
Mhm.
participate
Oh yeah.
in any future types of events that you're having.
Yeah. There's nothing on the books just yet. We're in the phase where we are applying to exhibitions. But in the stewardship, it is something that like, it's not a permanent position. So between I and the current keeper, like we have a regular conversation about like how this is going. Do you want to continue? Like, is it time to move this on to someone else? But in the same sort of space, like I really enjoyed, after kind of getting some time to like debrief and think about the project, I really enjoyed that interaction. So I do intend to like create more things that kind of have that interactive experiential sort of process.
Thank you. Those are all the formal questions that we received in the chat. Sorry, I misspoke. Actually, one person just chatted if they'd like to hear about your future plans, where you're thinking of going in going forward in the future.
In the future, like right now, we're working on a bode. That's kind of that's the baby right now. But I want to get more back into some of the installation work, similar to the Here vibration. The more distance I have from the work itself, the more I've been able to kind of go back and like pick up things. I'm like, oh, I need to discover this some more. So I don't think I'll be going back to cheese puffs because I don't want to do that anymore. But I do want to like revisit that work and pull out some more narratives from it.
And do you have social media or a website that people can follow? Instagram
Yes.
or a website?
I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you.
Sure.
And Bonnie, those are all the formal questions then that we have. I'll throw it back to you.
Great. I don't know how much time we have left.
We have just a few minutes. It's 9 minutes exactly left.
Oh, okay.
So you could
Okay,
just,
so I could ask one more question.
Sure.
So Jessica, we didn't really ask about your choice of materials, your, you say that you are multimedia. It's clear that you are. You showed us something that really was projection, or I'm forgetting exactly. Anyway, and you're also doing silk screening. And anyway, so I wondered if you talk about the materials you use, your choice of them, how. Yeah.
I guess with materials, I kind of start in the thrift store usually. And I like to kind of be around the things that like have been useful to somebody at some point, but like they could be interpreted in a different way or altered slightly. Like at some point in the videos that I'm doing, I am using an ab roller to crush the cheese puffs. So it's like this kind of rolling thing that looks like I'm exercising, but also using it as a tool. And so I guess like things like that kind of just start to come into play. Like there is a lot of like play in the making, and just kind of thinking about like ways that you can reinterpret everything around you. So materials, often I describe it as like I don't know where my work is, because like sometimes things get into my home space and like they're like, oh wait, I made that for this installation and now it's a lamp that I've been using for however long. So I really like that play between things being able to kind of exist in an art space, but also like get back into just the everyday regular space as well.
Mm-hmm. I saw a question come in, and I'll go there because I think it's really interesting. Wondering about the role of humor in your work. Better than Bezos, cheese puffs, if that's part of your, as the writer says, methodology of repair.
Definitely. Humor is really important because it is such a like heavy topic and a heavy sort of like it's a heavy thing to try to eradicate from your body. So, and I also like realize that like in making the work, there is a certain amount of like absurdity and a certain amount of futility. So I like to find a lot of humor in that space of like the Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill and it tumbles right back down. And there's such a, it's sad, but it's humorous at the same time. Like, I really enjoy a sad clown. I think Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton are really kind of important to like my thinking, and Lucille Ball, like thinking about the way that those things kind of play out.
Talk a little bit about how all of this informs your teaching.
I've been kind of, especially more recently, it's gotten me to a space where I really like to think of myself more as a facilitator. I give my students a lot of agency in the classroom to kind of decide like what we're doing and kind of the like code of conduct between them and their peers, like what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. I really like to have that conversation with them so that like, it's whether we want to or not, like it's not always just easy to be like, here are your rules, do as I say, and like go forth. But like if people are deciding for themselves like what it is that how we're treating each other, or is it appropriate to turn in late work? What does that do to your peers? What does that do to me? Like, what are you asking of me when you ask me to accept something late? Or or those sorts of things. So I think just kind of getting rid of this idea of me being the total authority in the classroom. I take that from my work and recognizing that everybody kind of has their own expertise or experience that can really add to our collective experience.
What courses do you teach?
Right now I'm teaching a woodcut and relief printmaking class, and then a multimodal printmaking class.
Okay. Just for any students who want to, either actual students or wannabe students who want to take a class with you.
Yeah.
I thought I would ask that. I'm trying to watch time. We
have just about 4 minutes.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about in Abode and somehow the other in the flag. I wondered how you extend your knowledge and projects, or how you see that into opportunities for community service.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a space that I'm definitely learning about. Trying to kind of figure out like a responsible and like impactful way to work in communities. Because right now I'm in a totally new community, and like spending time in these spaces and kind of just like learning like what's needed here, what's wanted. Like I don't want to come in and be like, look at my flag, and everybody's like, we don't care. So I'm just in a space of listening and kind of seeing like what can be done. I do like to do kind of like public facing printmaking workshops where people get to either make a print or see it in action, or kind of understand what the process is. Because I think like printmaking is a very like, it can be a way in which people can empower themselves in a very particular way. And it's kind of something that gets like pushed to like, it seems like very few people actually understand it or like participate in it, but it really could have this much larger life.
And are you working in the digital medium in printmaking? Are you working in the
it's very physical. Yeah. I do some digital, but I'm more so enjoy the like actual screen printing and actually rolling out the press, and that's how I get my workout.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Well, I think we're at time. This has been really fascinating. We really appreciate learning about your work and your willingness to share it, and kind of giving us all a lot to think about. So Jessica, I really just want to thank you. People are writing thank you in the chat.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation, and look forward to. We have one more in the series. We're filling up April. April doesn't have enough in it already, so we're filling it up some more. So you want to say the date, Linda?
Yeah, actually, it's next week. It's May 6th, 9 a.m. Is our last one, and it is with English professor Jershon Avilez. And I'm sure I probably said that wrong, but
you got it wrong. Great. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and take care.